"Pretend to be my wife," the rich cowboy said, but one kiss shattered his only rule. Clara Bennett had always believed that hard work could fix almost anything. She was not born into money or connections. She grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other's names, stories, and mistakes. Her parents had taught her to stand on her own feet, to never depend on anyone, and to keep her promises no matter how difficult things became. For years, she lived by those lessons. After finishing college, she returned to her hometown and started a small event planning business. At first, people doubted her. They said the town was too small for something like that. They said people would rather plan their own weddings and parties. But Clara proved them wrong. She worked long hours, met clients with a warm smile, and turned simple barns and backyards into beautiful celebration spaces. Slowly, her business began to grow. Then came a difficult year. 2 major clients canceled their bookings at the last minute. A storm damaged decorations she had already paid for. A promised partnership with a catering company fell apart without warning. Money that she had carefully saved disappeared faster than she could replace it. Every morning she woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest, wondering how she would manage another week. Still, she refused to give up. When she received a call about organizing a large charity fundraiser at the Calloway Ranch, she knew this was her chance. The Calloway name carried weight. Everyone in the county knew about their land. Thousands of acres of rolling fields, cattle, and wide-open skies. If she handled this event well, it could change everything for her business. But the Calloway family also had a reputation. They were known for being private, especially Ethan Calloway. Ethan had taken over the ranch after his father passed away. He was young for such responsibility, but people respected him. He was serious, quiet, and rarely seen at town gatherings. Some said he was proud. Others said he simply valued his space. After a very public breakup 2 years ago, he had become even more distant. Since then, he focused only on business and the ranch. Clara tried not to listen to gossip. She cared about professionalism, not rumors. The first time she drove up to the ranch, she felt small compared to the wide landscape around her. The house stood strong against the horizon, built from dark wood and stone, with large windows that reflected the sky. Workers moved in the distance, preparing equipment for the upcoming fundraiser. She stepped out of her car, smoothed down her simple blue dress, and reminded herself to stay confident. When she was led into the main house, she expected to wait. Instead, Ethan himself walked into the room. He was taller than she imagined, dressed in a clean button-down shirt and jeans. His posture was straight, his expression calm but unreadable. His eyes studied her carefully, not in a rude way, but in a way that made her feel he noticed everything. "Miss Bennett," he said politely, extending his hand. "Mr. Calloway," she replied, shaking it firmly. His handshake was steady and warm, not cold like she expected. They sat down to discuss the fundraiser. Clara laid out her plans clearly: the seating arrangement, the lighting setup, the music schedule, the donation table placement. She spoke with confidence even though she felt nervous inside. Ethan listened without interrupting. He asked thoughtful questions about timing and guest flow. He seemed focused, practical, and careful about details. She could tell he took the event seriously. "This fundraiser matters," he said at one point. "The ranch supports several community programs. I don't want it to feel careless." "It won't," Clara answered. "It will feel welcoming and organized. People will remember it," almost like approval. Over the next few days, Clara worked closely with the ranch staff. She coordinated deliveries, adjusted decoration plans to match the rustic setting, and handled small problems without complaining. She noticed that Ethan was always nearby, observing quietly. He rarely praised anyone openly, but she caught him watching her solve issues with calm determination. Late one afternoon, just 2 days before the fundraiser, Ethan asked her to meet him in his office. The room was simple but elegant. A large wooden desk sat near a window overlooking the fields. Sunlight poured in, casting long shadows across the floor. Clara sensed that this was not a routine check-in. Ethan stood near the window instead of sitting. "There's something we need to discuss," he said. His tone was controlled, but there was tension underneath it. Clara straightened slightly. "Is there a problem with the event?" "No," he replied. "The event is fine." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My business partners are arriving tomorrow. They're investing in a land expansion project. It's important that everything goes smoothly." "That makes sense," Clara said. "We'll make sure they're impressed." He turned to face her fully. "They believe I'm married." Clara blinked, unsure she heard correctly. "I'm sorry? I told them years ago that I was married," he continued calmly. "It avoided certain complications. Now the story has continued longer than I expected. They're traditional men. They see stability in family life. If they find out I lied, it could damage trust. Clara's mind raced. She understood business image mattered, but she didn't understand why he was telling her. Ethan took a slow breath. I need someone to pretend to be my wife for the weekend. Clara stared at him, certain this had to be some kind of joke. His expression, however, remained serious. You want me to what? She asked softly. Attend dinners with us. Wear a wedding ring. Present a united front. Nothing more. Her heart pounded. She had handled difficult clients, but this was beyond anything she expected. That's not exactly in my job description, she said carefully. I know, he replied. And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. He stepped closer to his desk and opened a small drawer. From it, he took out a simple velvet box and placed it on the desk without opening it. It's temporary, he continued. 3 days. Once they leave, it's over. Clara's thoughts spun in different directions. This was risky. People in town talked. If anyone misunderstood, her reputation could suffer. Yet at the same time, she remembered the unpaid invoices sitting on her kitchen table. I can compensate you separately, Ethan added. More than the event fee. She swallowed. Why me? Because you're professional. You're composed under pressure. And I trust you to handle yourself with dignity. That surprised her. Trust was not a word she expected from him. She walked to the window, looking out at the fields. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in warm colors. Her reflection in the glass looked uncertain. This is only acting? She asked finally. Only acting, he confirmed. There will be one rule. She turned back toward him. No kissing. No emotional confusion. We maintain boundaries. This is strictly business. The firmness in his voice made it clear that the rule mattered deeply to him. Clara nodded slowly. The arrangement sounded simple on the surface, but something about it felt like stepping onto thin ice. I need time to think, she said. Of course, Ethan replied. That night, Clara lay awake in her small apartment. The ceiling fan spun slowly above her. She replayed the conversation again and again. Part of her felt offended. Another part understood the practical side of it. There's only 3 days. She would act polite. Smile. Shake hands. Share a table. By morning, reality pushed her toward a decision. Her business needed stability. She needed this opportunity to succeed, and Ethan had been respectful, not careless. When she returned to the ranch that day, she found him outside near the barn, speaking with workers. He noticed her arrival immediately. She walked up to him, steady despite the nerves inside her. I'll do it, she said. He studied her face carefully, making sure she was certain. Are you sure? He asked. Yes, she replied, but we stick to the rule. We stick to the rule. In that moment, neither of them understood how fragile rules could be. They believed they were stepping into a simple arrangement. They had no idea that pretending would awaken feelings neither of them had planned for. And as the business partners' cars approached the long gravel road that afternoon, Clara slipped a simple ring onto her finger, took a steady breath, and prepared to play a role that would quietly begin to change her life. The moment Clara slipped a simple diamond ring onto her finger, everything around her felt different. It was just a small piece of jewelry, cool against her skin, but it carried a weight she could not explain. She looked at her hand for a long second before lowering it. This was only an act, she reminded herself. 3 days. Smile. Stay calm. Leave. That afternoon, the business partners arrived at the ranch in 2 black cars that rolled slowly up the long gravel road. Dust rose behind them in soft clouds. The ranch staff lined up neatly near the entrance of the main house. Ethan stood straight, confident, and composed. Clara stood beside him, her posture relaxed but graceful, just as they had practiced. When the first car door opened, Ethan gently placed his hand at the small of Clara's back. The touch surprised her, but she did not react. It felt natural, almost protective. She reminded herself it was part of the performance. 2 older men stepped out, dressed in expensive suits that looked slightly out of place against the wide-open land. Their eyes quickly moved to Clara. She saw curiosity in their expressions. Gentlemen, Ethan greeted them firmly. Welcome to Calloway Ranch. And this is my wife, Clara. The word echoed in her mind, but she kept her smile steady. She extended her hand politely. It's a pleasure to meet you. We're very glad you could come. Her voice sounded calm, even warm. Inside, her heart beat faster than usual. The men seemed pleased. One of them chuckled. So this is the lucky lady we've heard about. Clara laughed softly, glancing at Ethan as if they shared a private joke. I think I'm the lucky one, she replied smoothly. Ethan's eyes met hers for half a second. Something unreadable passed between them. maybe surprised at how easily she stepped into the role. The first evening moved quickly. Clara walked beside Ethan as they gave the guests a tour of the ranch. She asked thoughtful questions about their flight, their families, their interests. She listened carefully and remembered small details, just as she did with her own clients. She noticed that when she spoke, the men relaxed. The conversation flowed more naturally. At dinner, the long wooden table was set with simple but elegant decorations. Soft lights hung above, creating a warm atmosphere. Clara took the seat beside Ethan, close enough that their arms almost touched. Throughout the meal, the partners asked questions, not only about the land and investment plans, but about their marriage. "How long have you two been married?" one of them asked while cutting his steak. Clara did not hesitate. 3 years, she answered gently, glancing at Ethan. "It doesn't feel that long, though." Ethan nodded in agreement. "Time moves fast when you're busy." "And how did you meet?" That question had been discussed earlier. They had created a simple story. A conference in Denver, a shared table at a crowded cafe. Clara told the story naturally, adding small details about spilled coffee and a long conversation that lasted until closing time. She spoke as if the memory truly belonged to her. The men laughed, clearly entertained. Under the table, Clara felt Ethan's knee brush lightly against hers. It could have been accidental, but it made her suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. Later that night, when the guests retired to their rooms, Clara finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. She walked toward the staircase, removing her earrings carefully. "You handled that well." Ethan's voice came from behind her. She turned. He stood a few steps away, jacket removed, sleeves slightly rolled up. He looked less formal now, more human. "It wasn't too difficult," she replied. "I've dealt with nervous brides and demanding families. This was just a different kind of event." A faint smile appeared on his face. "You make it look easy." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, just charged in a quiet way. "Good night, Ethan," she said gently. "Good night, Clara." They walked in opposite directions down the hallway. Separate rooms, separate lives. But sleep did not come easily. The next day brought the charity fundraiser. The ranch buzzed with activity. Guests from town arrived, dressed in formal clothes that contrasted with the country setting. Music played softly in the background. Decorations glowed under the evening lights, exactly as Clara had planned. Clara moved through the crowd with confidence. She greeted donors, directed staff, and solved small problems before anyone else noticed them. Ethan stayed close to his partners, discussing numbers and contracts, but every so often his eyes searched the crowd for her. At one point, one of the partners pulled Ethan aside. Clara could not hear the full conversation, but she saw the way the man nodded approvingly while glancing toward her. "She's impressive," the partner said later during a group discussion. "A strong woman beside you." "That says a lot." Ethan's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes softened. "Yes," he replied simply. As the night continued, Clara felt more comfortable in her role. When photographers asked for pictures, she stood beside Ethan naturally. When someone congratulated them on their beautiful marriage, she smiled without hesitation. At one point, an elderly guest approached her quietly. "You've brought warmth back to this house," the woman said kindly. "It's been a long time since I've seen him smile like this." Clara did not know how to respond. She simply thanked her politely. But the words stayed with her. Later that evening, one of the partners decided to test them. "So, Clara," he said casually while holding a glass in his hand, "what's Ethan's most annoying habit?" The question caught her off guard for half a second. She laughed lightly. "He pretends he doesn't need help, even when he does." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And what kind of help is that?" the partner asked with amusement. "Reminding him to take breaks," she answered smoothly. "He works too much." Ethan shook his head slightly but did not deny it. "And what about you?" Clara asked playfully, turning the attention toward him. "What's my most annoying habit?" He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. "You care too much," he said quietly. "About everything." The answer surprised her. It felt real, not rehearsed. The laughter around the table faded into the background for a second. Something unspoken passed between them again. As the fundraiser ended successfully, the partners seemed more than satisfied. Donations exceeded expectations. The atmosphere felt positive. The investment deal was moving forward smoothly. But inside Clara, something had begun to change. She had expected this weekend to feel fake. Instead, certain moments felt strangely genuine. The way Ethan listened when she spoke. The way he stepped slightly closer when someone made her uncomfortable. The way his voice softened when he said her name. Back inside the quiet house later that night, the air felt heavier. "You don't have to keep acting when we're alone," Clara said softly as they walked toward the hallway. "I know," Ethan replied, but neither of them stepped away immediately. The distance between them seemed smaller than before. He looked tired, but not in the same way she had seen earlier in the week. There was something else in his expression now, something thoughtful. "You were remarkable tonight," he said. "You saved more than just the event." She understood what he meant. "The deal was almost secure. That's what I was hired to do," she reminded him gently. He nodded, yet his gaze lingered. The rule still stood between them like an invisible wall. No crossing lines, only business. But as Clara walked into her room and closed the door quietly behind her, she leaned against it for a moment. Her heartbeat felt unsteady. She touched the ring on her finger again. It was supposed to feel like a prop. Instead, it felt personal. Down the hall, Ethan stood alone in the dim light. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking about how naturally she had fit into his life, how easily she had stepped into spaces that had been empty for years. The weekend was not over yet. The partners were satisfied. The performance was convincing, but something neither of them had planned was quietly growing beneath the surface. And pretending was beginning to feel far more complicated than either of them expected. That morning had started calm and bright. The sky was clear, and the air felt warm across the open fields of the ranch. The business partners were scheduled to leave by afternoon, and Clara had already begun mentally preparing herself to return to her normal life. She told herself the hardest part was over. The fundraiser had been a success. The partners seemed impressed. The deal was nearly complete. Everything had gone according to plan. But just before noon, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Within an hour, the wind grew stronger, bending the tall grass in restless waves. By the time lunch ended, heavy rain poured from the sky, and thunder rolled across the valley. Flights were delayed, roads became difficult to travel. The partners were forced to extend their stay for 3 more days. When Clara heard the news, she felt something shift inside her. 3 more days of pretending. 3 more days of calling him her husband. 3 more days of standing close enough to feel his presence but not allowed to cross the line he had clearly drawn. Ethan handled the situation calmly, arranging additional rooms and adjusting schedules. On the outside, nothing about him changed, but Clara noticed the tightness in his jaw and the quiet tension in his shoulders. That evening, the rain did not stop. It fell harder, hitting the windows in steady waves. The sky turned dark earlier than usual, and the entire ranch seemed wrapped in gray. Dinner felt different that night. The partners were slightly restless from the delay, asking more personal questions, watching Clara and Ethan more carefully. Perhaps they were bored. Perhaps they were simply curious. 3 years of marriage, one of the partners said thoughtfully. You must have had disagreements. Clara smiled politely. Of course, no 2 people agree on everything. Clara looked at Ethan before answering. For a brief second, she forgot this was supposed to be an act. We talk, she said simply, even when it's uncomfortable. There was something deeper in his expression this time, something thoughtful. Yes, he added quietly, we talk. Later that night, the storm grew worse. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by loud thunder that shook the windows. Around midnight, the power suddenly went out across the ranch. The entire house fell into darkness. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then the soft sound of rain continued against the roof. Clara stepped into the hallway, holding her phone for light. At the same time, Ethan opened his door across from hers. The dim glow from their screens met in the middle. The backup generator should start soon, he said calmly. As if on cue, a soft hum echoed through the house, and faint lights flickered on in certain areas, but much of the house remained dim, lit only by candles the staff quickly placed around common spaces. The large living room felt smaller under candlelight. Shadows danced against the walls. The storm outside created a distant, steady rhythm. The partners had already retreated to their rooms. For the first time since this arrangement began, the house felt quiet. Not formal, not staged, just quiet. Clara sat down on the couch near the fireplace, watching the flames move gently. Ethan stood near the window for a moment before turning toward her. You can go to bed, he said. It's been a long few days. I'm not tired, she replied honestly. That was not entirely true. She was tired, but her mind felt too awake to rest. After a pause, he sat down in the armchair across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the fire and the storm. It wasn't supposed to be this long, he said finally. I know. Without the formal clothes and public expressions, he looked different, less guarded. more human. "Why did you really make that rule?" she asked gently. He did not pretend to misunderstand her. He leaned back slightly, eyes fixed on the fire. "Because I don't mix business with emotions," he said at first. That's not the real reason," she replied quietly. He gave a small, almost humorless smile. "You noticed too much." She didn't respond. She simply waited. After a long pause, he spoke again, his voice lower now. "The last time I let someone close, it didn't end well," he admitted. She didn't want this life. The ranch was too quiet, too isolated. She wanted cities, travel, constant excitement. I thought I could change enough to make her stay. He shook his head slightly. I was wrong. There was no bitterness in his voice, only honesty. "So you built rules instead," she said softly. "Yes." "And pretending was easier than trying again?" she asked. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Yes, honest, vulnerable. At that moment, a loud crash of thunder shook the house. The sudden noise made Clara jump slightly. Without thinking, she stood up quickly. Her heart raced. Ethan rose at the same time. "It's just thunder," he said gently. "I know," she replied, but her voice sounded softer now. Another flash of lightning lit up the room briefly, followed by darkness again. Instinctively, she stepped closer to him. He hesitated only for a second before placing his hands lightly on her arms, steadying her. The closeness felt different this time. There were no watching eyes, no business partners, no need to perform. Just two people standing in the quiet glow of candlelight. Clara could feel the warmth of his hands through the thin fabric of her sleeves. Her breathing slowed, but her heartbeat remained fast. "We should keep our distance," he said quietly, though he did not move away. Neither of them stepped back. The rule hovered between them like a fragile wall. No kissing. No crossing lines. No emotional confusion. But emotions do not always obey logic. He lifted one hand slowly to her chin, as if giving her the chance to pull away. She didn't. For a brief second, their eyes held each other's. There was hesitation there, and fear, but also something deeper. Something honest. "This wasn't part of the agreement," he murmured. "No," she agreed softly. The storm outside seemed distant now, and then, carefully, gently, he kissed her. It was not rushed, not dramatic. It was slow, uncertain at first, as if both of them were aware that this single moment could change everything. Clara felt the world narrow to that small space between them. The rules shattered quietly, not with noise but with realization. This was not acting. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke immediately. The fire continued to burn. The rain continued to fall. Ethan stepped back first, running a hand through his hair as if trying to clear his thoughts. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Clara's heart felt full and confused at the same time. "Do you regret it?" she asked gently. He looked at her for a long moment. No. The honesty in that single word made everything more complicated. Silence filled the room again, but this time it was heavy with meaning. "We agreed on boundaries," he said quietly. "Yes, and I broke them. We both did." The truth settled between them. Neither of them knew what would happen next. The storm outside slowly began to calm. The thunder moved farther away, but inside the house, something had shifted permanently. This was no longer just a performance. The line between pretending and feeling had disappeared, and both of them knew that when morning came, nothing would feel as simple as it once did. Sunlight slipped through the wide windows, lighting up the wooden floors and long hallways as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. The rain had stopped. The sky looked fresh and clear. Birds moved across the open fields as if the world had reset itself. But for Clara and Ethan, nothing had reset. Clara woke up early, even though she had barely slept. The memory of the kiss replayed in her mind again and again. It had not felt like a mistake. It had felt honest, real. And that was exactly what made it complicated. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ring still resting on her finger. It no longer felt like a simple prop. It felt like a symbol of something she was not ready to name. After taking a slow breath, she stood up and prepared for the day. If the partners noticed anything unusual, the entire arrangement could fall apart. No matter what she felt inside, she had to remain composed. When she walked into the dining room for breakfast, Ethan was already there. He stood near the coffee table, dressed neatly, posture straight, expression controlled. If someone had walked in at that moment, they would never guess what had happened just hours earlier. Their eyes met briefly. There was something different in his gaze now. Not cold, not distant, but careful. "Good morning," he said calmly. "Good morning," she replied. Their voices were steady, almost professional. The business partners entered a few minutes later, cheerful and unaware of the quiet tension in the room. Breakfast conversation focused on numbers, timelines, and legal documents. The investment contract was nearly finalized. Clara played her role perfectly. She poured coffee, smiled at the right moments, and added light comments to keep the mood relaxed. Ethan remained confident and focused on the deal. If anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed the slight distance between them. He no longer placed his hand gently at her back. She no longer leaned slightly toward him. The natural rhythm they had built over the past days felt, interrupted, but it was there. By afternoon, the storm had cleared enough for travel. The partners prepared to leave. Handshakes were exchanged. Promises of future meetings were made. The investment deal was officially confirmed. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Calloway," one of the men said warmly as he shook Clara's hand. "The pleasure was ours," she answered politely. Ethan stood beside her, composed and steady. On the outside, everything had succeeded. As the cars drove away down the long gravel road, silence returned to the ranch. The performance was over. Clara slowly removed the ring from her finger. For a second, she hesitated before placing it carefully on the table inside the house. Ethan watched the small movement. "You don't have to rush," he said quietly. "It's part of the agreement," she replied gently. The words sounded distant now. They stood facing each other in the quiet living room. Without the presence of others, the space felt larger, emptier. "What happened last night?" he began. "Shouldn't have happened," he finished. The sentence felt heavier than expected. Clara crossed her arms lightly, not out of anger, but to steady herself. "You said you didn't regret it," she reminded him. "I don't," he replied quickly. "But that doesn't mean it was wise." She understood what he meant. The deal had been important. The arrangement had been clear. Lines had been drawn for a reason.
"I don't want you to think I confused the situation," he continued.
"You did your job exceptionally. I respect you. What happened was my responsibility." His tone was controlled, almost too controlled. Clara felt something inside her tighten. It wasn't disappointment exactly. It was the realization that he was retreating, building walls again. "It wasn't just your responsibility," she said softly. "I was there too." He looked at her, conflict visible in his expression. "This is exactly why I made that rule," he admitted. "I don't blur lines. It complicates everything." "And feelings are complications?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Yes." The honesty stung more than she expected. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan walked toward his desk and returned with an envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "This is your payment," he said. "More than we agreed on. You earned it." She glanced at the envelope but did not touch it immediately. "I didn't do this for extra money," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but you deserve it." The formality in his tone created distance. The warmth from the stormy night seemed far away now. Clara picked up the envelope slowly. She met his eyes one last time. "Thank you for trusting me," she said. His jaw tightened slightly. "Thank you for helping me." The goodbye felt unfinished. She walked toward the door with steady steps, refusing to let her emotions show. Outside, the air felt fresh after the rain. The world looked peaceful, almost beautiful. As she drove away from the ranch, she did not look back. Back in her small apartment, life returned to normal, or at least it tried to. She used the money to pay her outstanding bills. She invested in new decorations and marketing. Slowly, her business began to grow again. New clients called. New events were scheduled. On the outside, everything improved. But in quiet moments, her thoughts drifted back to the ranch, to the storm, to the way he had looked at her when the rule broke. Meanwhile, Ethan walked through the ranch house alone that evening. The staff moved quietly, respecting his space. The investment deal had secured the ranch's future. He should have felt relieved. Instead, the house felt strangely empty. He passed the living room where they had sat by the fire. The memory returned clearly. Candlelight, thunder, her steady presence. He told himself he had done the right thing, protecting boundaries, keeping emotions separate from business. That had always been his strength. Yet as the days passed, he noticed something uncomfortable. The house no longer felt warm. At dinner, he found himself looking toward the doorway, half expecting her to walk in with her calm smile. When a staff member laughed in the kitchen, he remembered how easily she had connected with everyone. He missed the sound of her footsteps in the hallway. He missed the quiet conversations they had shared. More than anything, he missed the way she made the large ranch feel alive. Weeks passed. Clara's business continued to improve. She grew stronger and more confident. The experience at the ranch had reminded her of her own value, her intelligence, her ability to adapt, her strength under pressure. Yet late at night, when work was done and silence filled her apartment, she sometimes touched the empty space on her finger where the ring had once rested, not because she believed in the act, but because the feelings had been real. Back at the ranch, Ethan found himself standing in the same spot by the window where he had first asked her to pretend. The land stretched wide before him, secure and protected. He had achieved what he wanted. So why did it feel incomplete? For the first time in years, he questioned his own rule. Had it protected him, or had it cost him something rare? The storm had passed long ago, but inside both of them something unfinished remained, and neither of them knew how much longer they could pretend it didn't matter. Life moved forward for Clara, at least on the outside. Her business slowly became stable again. The money she earned from the ranch helped her clear her debts and invest in better equipment. She redesigned her website, printed new brochures, and even hired a part-time assistant to help manage bookings. Clients began recommending her to others. Weddings, birthday celebrations, charity dinners. Her calendar filled faster than it had in years. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud of herself again. She no longer felt desperate. She no longer felt like she needed saving. And maybe that was the biggest change of all. But even as her days became busy, quiet moments still carried a familiar memory. Sometimes while arranging flowers or setting up tables, her thoughts drifted back to the ranch, to wide fields under golden sunsets, to candlelight during the storm, to the way Ethan's voice softened when he spoke honestly. She never reached out to him. He never called. Part of her believed that was for the best. Meanwhile, life at the ranch returned to its usual rhythm. The investment deal had secured expansion plans, new fences were built, more workers were hired, the land was thriving. Ethan should have felt satisfied. Instead, he felt restless. He told himself it was simply the adjustment after weeks of high pressure, but deep down, he knew that was not the truth. The ranch house felt too quiet again. Before Clara arrived, he had grown used to silence. He preferred it. Silence meant control. Silence meant no emotional risk. But now the quiet felt different, empty. He would walk past the living room and remember the night of the storm. He would pass the kitchen and recall her soft laughter with the housekeeper. Even small things, like the way she had adjusted decorations to make the space feel warmer, stayed in his mind. He realized something uncomfortable. He had not been pretending, not completely. One evening, as the sun lowered across the fields, Ethan stood alone near the fence line. The sky glowed orange and pink, stretching endlessly above him. He thought about the rule he had created. No crossing lines, no mixing emotions with business. At the time, it had seemed wise, safe. But safety can sometimes look like strength when it is actually fear. He had convinced himself that keeping distance meant avoiding pain. Yet pushing Clara away had not protected him, and it only left him wondering what might have been. For the first time in years, Ethan admitted something to himself. He missed her. Not because she played the role well, but because she had brought warmth into his life without forcing it, and he had sent her away. The realization stayed with him for days. Finally, one morning, he made a decision. He drove into town. Clara was busy arranging centerpieces in her small office when she heard a truck stop outside. She barely glanced toward the window at first, assuming it was a delivery. But when she looked again, her hands froze. She recognized the truck instantly. Her heart skipped once, then steadied. She placed the flowers down carefully and wiped her hands on a cloth before walking toward the door. Ethan stepped inside slowly. He wasn't dressed formally, just jeans, boots, and a simple shirt. He held his hat in one hand, not as a performance, but almost as a sign of respect. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt smaller than the ranch house, but somehow more personal. "Hello, Clara," he said quietly. "Hello, Ethan." His voice carried something new. Not authority, not control, but uncertainty. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he added. "You are not," she replied calmly, though her heart beat a little faster. He looked around briefly at the decorations, the photographs of past events on the walls. "You've built something impressive here," he said. "I worked hard," she answered simply. "I know you did." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "I've been thinking," he began. She waited. About the weekend. About the rule. Her expression remained steady, but she listened closely. "I told myself I was protecting both of us," he continued, "but the truth is, I was protecting myself. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid of repeating old mistakes. Afraid of caring more than I should. Clara crossed her arms lightly, not defensively, but thoughtfully. And now? She asked gently. Now I realize something, he said. The kiss wasn't the mistake. Pushing you away was. The words were simple, but they carried weight. She studied him carefully. He did not look like a man trying to control a situation. He looked like someone willing to risk vulnerability. I don't want to pretend anymore, he said. Her breath slowed. No contracts, he added. No rules to avoid feelings. If we try something, it will be real. Clara felt a mixture of emotions. Hope, caution, strength. 2 months ago, she might have accepted immediately. Back then, she was struggling, uncertain, dependent on the opportunity. But now she stood on her own feet. I don't need saving, she said softly. I know, he replied quickly. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? Because I miss you, he said honestly. Because the ranch doesn't feel like home without you. Because when I think about the future, you're in it. The room felt very still. She searched his face for doubt, for hesitation. She found none. You once said feelings complicate things, she reminded him. They do, he agreed, but maybe complicated isn't the same as wrong. A small smile touched her lips despite herself. Then at least we'll know we tried honestly, he answered, not hiding behind rules. This won't be pretending, she said. No image for business. No expectations from anyone else. Only us, he said quietly. She took a moment before answering. During those 2 months apart, she had grown stronger. She had rebuilt her confidence. She had proven to herself that she could succeed alone. That strength allowed her to make a different kind of choice now. Not out of need, but out of desire. No pretending, she said finally. Relief softened his expression. No pretending, he repeated. For a second, they simply stood there, close but not touching. This time, there were no watching business partners. No storm. No performance. Just two people choosing honestly. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished. She didn't. When he leaned forward and kissed her, it felt different from that night by the fire. There was no hesitation, no fear of breaking rules. It was steady, intentional, real. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead lightly against his. If we do this, she said softly, we do it with trust. You have my word, he replied. Their relationship did not transform overnight into something perfect. There were still adjustments. Clara continued running her business in town. Ethan continued managing the ranch. They learned about each other outside of performance, small habits, quiet strengths, simple disagreements. But this time, when challenges appeared, they talked, not as actors, not as business partners, but as two people willing to risk vulnerability. The ranch slowly became warmer again. Clara's laughter returned to the large halls. Ethan's guarded walls softened, not because he lost strength, but because he chose openness. The man who once created one strict rule discovered something unexpected. Sometimes the very line you draw to protect your heart is the line that keeps real happiness away. And sometimes all it takes to change everything is the courage to stop pretending.